Thank you, Tuana. That song that was well chosen and well played. And you ministered to me and to all of us here today. Be still, my soul, the Lord is on thy side. So well played. Thank you so much. Good morning, saints. Good morning, sinners. We're so glad you've made it to the early morning part of our service for today. I'm going to use the approach more of presenting a paper than presenting a sermon this morning. And I know that you will be blessed. I want to thank Mr. Colin Lawrence and Dr. HCHE for arranging the program, making sure we have things in place and that we can deal with this very important part of our journey, preparation for the end time. And so I'm going to deal with the subtopic of missiology and the end time. And I will deal particularly with from tension to transformation for mission. And I just call it in brief T2T for M. It's something I'm bringing to you that must still be defended on other levels, but I'm sure you will appreciate it this morning. And so I want to just give you an outline of what I want to walk with you through the next hour. I want to first look at the end time. We have already heard that we are living in the end times. And then I want to define missiology as a discipline. So because we're looking at missiology and end time. And then thirdly, the global HCHE Church strategic plan, which many of the final year students at Helderberg College Theology are presently doing. And then concluding with T2T for M for the end time. Is that okay with you? Is that all right with you? Amen. Good. I believe we are living in the end time written about in Scripture. Daniel 2 confirms us through the dream of nations and powers by King Nebuchadnezzar in Babylon. And in surveying the dream of Daniel 2, you will notice we have passed Babylon's time, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and we are living in which period? Which period are we living in today? The divided world of feet of iron and clay where nations will not stick together. And the next major event to come is the destroying rock, which denotes the kingdom of God. So we are living in the end time. For more fascinating prophecies on this, you can consider Islam in Prophecy through Turkey, and also a presentation on DVD by Tim Rosenberg, who goes from the point of Daniel 11 and saying that Islam and Christianity will come together in the final times in very much opposite sides. And he goes from Daniel 11. So you can see that. If you need more information, you can speak to me afterwards for his website. But I want to go to the next section, and that is defining missiology as a discipline. The great missiologist and pioneer in missions, Verkale, defines missions as the study of the salvation activities of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit throughout the world, geared toward bringing the kingdom of God into existence. In developing this definition, he further asserts that missiology may never become a substitute for action and participation. God calls for participants and volunteers in his mission. In short, missiology is the study of God's mission, also called Missio Dei, which means that God is at work and he invites us to join him in working for his people. We don't do missions and invite God to work with us. God is at work and he invites us to participate in his mission. And so it is important that we recognize that we work with God in missions and through missions. Now there exists some tension about the positionality of missiology and theology. And Boss states that missiology must always be connected to theology. For he quotes Rahner, who came up with the statement and phrase that missiology and missions is the mother of all theology. Now in that you can already see the tension, because others feel that you can't say that, but Christians like Paul started to think and write theology because of the missionary activity of planting churches. So Bosch argues that initially missiology was seen as a subtopic of practical theology, but gradually missiology was developed into a new theological disciplines, and it stands distinct from practical theology, from biblical studies, from systematic theology and church history. So Bosch closes his argument by saying often missiologists are treated by other theologians as merely cheerleaders for mission or recruiters for missionary agencies. But this must be corrected. For theology, rightly understood, has no reason to exist other than to critically accompany the Missio Dei. So all other theologies find that in the mission of God, because God is at work, therefore we have the other theologies. For theology, it is a matter of life and death, that it should be in direct contact with mission. And he says since so many theologians are out of touch with missions, missiology has become the gadfly in the house of theology, the one that makes it uncomfortable. So that is just placing the very important place of the study of missions in all of theology. But I would like to go on to the Global SDA Church Strategic Plan. Some of you may be aware that every 5 years the Global Seventh-day Adventist Church reviews and plans its mission structure. And so in September 2015, a 5-year strategic plan was voted, entitled Reach the World. And you may have seen it. The cover of it looks like this. It is a document that is freely available online and through the missionary magazines of the church, like Maranatha. You will see there the 5-year plan of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Where do we want to go as a church? And there were 10 objectives that were voted for the church to reach. Out of those 10, they have emphasized 2 that relate particularly to missiology and to missions. And the 2 that we want to highlight is firstly the countries of the 1040 window. Now we just did this in class this past week, but it's an imaginary window really that covers North Africa, Asia, Europe through, and where we find the majority of people live. 2/3 of the world live in the 1040 window, and they are the poorest of poor people, but they are connected to the major religions of Buddhism, Islam, and Hinduism. And our greatest challenge lies there. It's called the heartland of the great world religions, which in many cases face economic and or political challenges and have restrictions on religious liberty. And the second emphasis of our church is the Adventist presence in large urban areas, especially in North Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. So our global church has set its target to want to reach, through missions and through the activities of the church, these areas. So those who live in the end times, like you and me, we should participate in trying to reach the peoples and the religions within those 2 key areas. That is the 1040 window and the urban areas. I am tempted this morning for you to do what I request the students, the final year students who do Missiology 3 with me. I set them the task to memorize the mission statement of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And at the beginning of each class we go through it, and they know already it will be an exam question, so they know it well. But I wonder if you could this morning, for no marks and no exam question, if you could recite it this morning and see how well we can become familiar with it. So let's first just see. I have highlighted some of the verbs there, but let's see if we just recite this together. You should be able to see it on the screen, right? You can see it at the back? So let's try it together. The mission of the Seventh-day Adventist. Oh, sorry, let's start again. You can see the screen? Let's try again. With that good Sabbath morning voice that you can raise together. Let's try again. The mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to call all people to become disciples of Jesus Christ, to proclaim the everlasting gospel embraced in the 3 angels' messages, Revelation 14, 6 to 12, and to prepare the world for Christ's soon return. I hope that you grasp from there, if there's nothing else you get from this morning, what we should be doing. The mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is this. This is what should occupy our mind and our activities in these end times. But now that you know that, I want to consequently focus on T to T for M for the end time. It is an expression of the Seventh-day Adventist mission statement. And let me share with you something which I have had the privilege to do. For the past 3 years, I've conducted research of the mission scenario in a local SDA church in the Helderberg Basin. And I'm so glad to see some of the members are present here today. This empirical missiological study aimed to explore and explain how and why theological, spiritual and socio-cultural factors influence the processes and practices towards integration as an expression of mission and reconciliation in the local Seventh-day Adventist Church. The research aimed to address the causal factors of the tension between the in-group. Listen carefully. The in-group is the local Seventh-day Adventist Church members, and the out-group, the foreign national Seventh-day Adventist Church members, which has impacted the integration and mission practice of the local Seventh-day Adventist Church. In essence, the research dealt with the transformation of identity issues of in-groups and out-groups from a literary and an empirical study. I'm of the conviction that the way forward for the local SDA Church in South Africa rests on two pillars. Pillar one is to deal with the causal factors of the tension that exists between insiders and outsiders. Following that, pillar two is to create a mission program that can be implemented at local SDA church level for all concerned. In opening the pathways for transformation, I see the role of missions in two ways. One, where mission transforms, in the name of Bosch's book called Transforming Missions. And two, where transformation leads to missions. Are we together? The one is where we are being transformed and therefore we want to do missions. And then the other one is as we do missions, we are being transformed. This connects with a dual transformative process generated by diversity and pluralism. These dual transformations fit well into what I want to discuss with you here today. The nature of this transformation is not just to justify mudslinging between local Seventh-day Adventist church members and foreign national Seventh-day Adventist church members, but it's for the common good of all. And so I bring two pillars to you today. The one I've entitled T to T, tension to transformation. The second pillar, T to T for M, tension to transformation for mission. Let me explain to you how I came about with this. And so therefore I would like to give you the positionality and operationality of the T to T model. Are we still together at 10 o'clock this morning? Okay, now that you know where the study comes from and through, I want you to look with me at this. From my empirical study at the local Seventh-day Adventist Church, I have perceived the need for addressing the causal factors of tension before transformation can occur. Too often, we have rushed our attempts at bringing church unity without opening the proverbial black box to see what works for whom, under which circumstances, and why. In the words of Pawson and Tilly. I have been teaching a part of this for probably 4 years or so to the ministerial students and to some of our multicultural students on campus. And I've written about it, but I'm of the conviction, my dear brothers and sisters, that at the end time where we find ourselves, that there is a value for first addressing the tensions as a precursor to change. The modus operandi for doing this is to firstly identify what are the tensions that exist between different groups in the church, and then secondly, speaking directly to them. And I need to say, it is not a comfortable topic or way to do it, because we naturally shy away from confrontation. But I need to bring to you this morning, firstly, pillar 1, and talk about it and see how, as we are living in the end times, will we really go forward using this. And it's really just my humble suggestion I'm bringing to you as the church here today. From tension to transformation, T to T. I want you to have a good look at that logo and design that you see there. In view of my proposal to the local church that I mentioned to you, I designed this model to include transformation. And for the first time, I named it T to T, tension to transformation. I designed the logo, and then I paid a branding company to finalize the design for me. A separate workbook was printed in full color and are in the hands of a few of you already, and is ready to be utilized. And this logo summarizes what I have put together. If you look at it, the T to T, you will see on the one side the T. That is there. Then the second T is that side. We have there 8 tracks, which are like railway tracks. And of course the number 2 there. It starts open, but it later on becomes closed in front. The color scheme is also very indicative of, while we are divided and tension, the colors are not strong and so bold because we're not making progress. But as we make progress in the darker colors, we see there the T1 and the T2 come together. And so the T1, the tension, as we have it there, needs to move together with the transformation as we move forward. I also need to just state that this is an aerial view that you see. So it's not looking upwards, but more you looking down onto this model. So think of it as a train track. 2 T's on 8 tracks moving forward from a divided bottom but unites in front. I want to move on and say to you, the T to T track is then built on 8 stations. And these stations I bring the same as a train journey. So we start off with our tensions there, and we will move through the 8 stations to where we come to our destination of transformation. And specifically in this model, I'm saying that we need to address the things that separates us at each station. So the model is built on 8 different things which divide people. And that comes from a study from Lustig and Kuster. And so I'm just going to mention it to you and define them briefly. But the idea is that you engage that at the local church level. So the first one is assuming similarity instead of difference. When we come together, we assume that all people and all cultures are like mine. And so we don't recognize that people actually have a different culture or cultural background. So we sing from the same hymn sheet, we sing together beautifully, and yet we have made a lot of other assumptions, and that leads to tension. The second tension is nonverbal misinterpretation. That is really when our actions and behaviors and the nonverbal communication, the signs we use, can very easily cause tension. There's one that I can maybe just mention to you by way of example. When you grow up with different cultures, you don't always know what is acceptable. And there's one that I can use, for example, when somebody stands up front and says to you in the church, what does that mean? Come here. Right? Now for some cultures that is fine when an older person says to a younger child, a younger person, come here. But because we don't necessarily know how that connects in other cultures, we sometimes may find a younger person saying to somebody older, and they don't mean anything bad by it, they're just really saying, come here. But that person may take offense because they may feel insulted. They may come there because it may be a church leader who's asking them to come forward. But at the same time, it has made and caused tension within the heart of the one who's coming. There are many others like that that we use. The third one is language. And because different language carries different meaning and symbols, we don't always use the language that is correct for another culture, the way we speak to one another, and that in itself can cause big tension. The fourth station is ethnocentrism, which is really when I consider my culture to be superior to those other cultures that I'm surrounded with. And there are reasons for it. The fact is, it causes tension. The fifth station is stereotypes. This is where we have faulty or incorrect belief or understanding about other people. And we say the way one person is, all people must be like that. And so we build faulty stereotypes. But that station connects to station number 6, which is prejudice. Because prejudice builds on the faulty stereotypes. Because certain people, there's one that I share in class, and I'm sure you don't mind me sharing it here. I say there's one that many have about Chinese people. And they say, Chinese people eat dogs. And that's a stereotype, which is a faulty stereotype, because you move around saying all Chinese eat dogs. So when you come to prejudice, you take that stereotype through and you start to say, because Chinese eat dogs, I don't like them, because my pet is no longer safe. All right? So we build on that. Then it becomes to discrimination. Discrimination is now prejudice in action, where we move over into behavior. So we're saying, because of that faulty stereotype, Chinese eat dogs, and I don't feel safe with my pet around them. In discrimination, I feel they shouldn't be working with animals at all. Okay? And I start to discriminate against Chinese people. And then comes racism, where we consider other races to be inferior and problematic, and we're saying that therefore Chinese are inferior race to what? Because we care for dogs, we care for animals and pets. They don't. And so the tension stations that I'm explaining to you is where we move from tension to transformation. And the way the model is then designed is for us to go through each one by using the term. I have a description. Then we look at an example in the multicultural church. We then work from that example and say, how can this move us to intercultural competence? Because I feel we are not all culturally competent. We have not had enough lessons, we have not had enough exposure. Some of us had enough exposure, but it wasn't good. And so we go around in church while we are together like this with a lot of tension amongst us. And therefore transformation, I believe, is very necessary. So the aim of T2T is to create a platform around the causal factors of tension and to be able to talk about it, and to, at local church level, through the church board, to start with the church board leaders. In that way, we can work through the 8 stations of transformation and go along with one another to where we are able to do that boundary crossing and remove the prejudices and the discrimination that exists amongst God's people. I have shared a sermon in which I address this prejudice by the title, "The Tight Skirt of Prejudice Shortens the Steps of Progress." The tight skirt of prejudice shortens the steps of progress. And it is so that if a leader has a problem with stereotypes, it will impact the way he or she motivates missions. If we have a problem with a certain group of people or a cultural group or ethnicity, we will find in our very much activity in missions and how we structure and lead, knowingly or unknowingly, that we will then discriminate against those who we are working with. I can ask you, for example, if there is a group that you really have a problem with, you are not going to necessarily start off there with doing missions or evangelism, I can assure you. We have an example like that with chapter 10. And where God had to work through a dream for him to go to Cornelius. And also vice versa, so that they can come together and deal with their prejudices and discrimination. So it doesn't just come easily for us, but we need to start with prayer and revival and then move through tension and transformation. It's a relational approach, as I'm building on Dr. Msosi's presentation last night, that we need to have our relations right if we want to do effective missions. And there's one more thing I need to say about the track that you see. Right in the middle of my logo there, the track of 8, all of that rests on something which is unseen but very powerful, and that is love. Love. The tracks on which the train of transformation runs is love. Love for God and love for one another. If that love is in place, any tension in the journey can be handled. I believe that. I also believe that if there isn't love for one another and love for God, we will not see the necessity of why should we deal with tension and transformation. There's no need for it, because love is a motivating factor. And I love the way Ellen White puts it and says, in the heart renewed by grace, love is the principle of action. Listen to the verbs you use. I just love it. It modifies the character, governs the impulses, controls the passions, subdues enmity, and ennobles the affections. This love, cherished in the soul, sweetens the life and sets a refining influence all around. Oh, I believe when such love exudes in the miasma of a sin-sick world which influences the local church, I believe transforming identities will result. For the love for God will be exhibited in the love for another, albeit one who is culturally and ethnically different from me. And Jesus' prayer for unity in John 17 can then be realized at local church level. This is where the horizontal beams of the cross meet the vertical beams. And we have the cross, because I believe we need to move from tension to transformation. T to T. I now want to, in the next few minutes, move over to the second pillar. What did I say is the first pillar? T to T. What does T to T stand for? Tension to transformation. My brothers, I really just want to say it to you. I have become aware of these tensions more and more, even in recent times. When it's not addressed, it divides us. And you know what is worse is we can come into a building like this with our differences and never really address the tensions. We can even go out on an event, on a missionary activity or evangelism, and not be united. We can give out the missionary book of the year, and yet the tension that exists amongst us. And so I believe we need to deal with the tension so that we can do a greater good for God. The second pillar is a mission practice for the local SDA church, which I call T2T for M. There are a few websites that are on the screen, because this deals with the particular local study that I have done. I find that there was a mission program lacking at the local church, and I wanted to address the matter holistically and believe meaningful mission results when tension and transformation have been addressed. That means T2T precedes T2T4M. How does one go about engaging the local church in missions, particularly urban missions? The World Church supplies good ideas, and these are websites you can use that you can have access to, where the church has put a lot of material and effort into preparing us and to be able to use that. They've gone so far to write a new textbook for colleges to actually use. It's called Introduction to Adventist Mission, written by Gordon Doss, just in 2018. Because the church recognized that worldwide, not all colleges offer missiology as a subject. And how do you prepare ministers without even looking at missions as part of their training? And so they have felt the need to bring together the church, and they have then seconded Dr. Doss 3 years ago to write this book as a textbook, and we will introduce it at Helderberg College next year, also in missiology studies. But it's aimed at bringing even higher institutions together in looking at missions and missiology in the final days. As I'm proposing a mission program, I feel the need that I need to make a distinction between evangelism and missions. here. I concur with Bosch, who clarifies the two ways of spreading the gospel as follows. Mission and evangelism are not synonyms. They are not synonyms. Nevertheless, they are indissolubly linked together and inextricably interwoven in theology and praxis. He continues to state that mission includes evangelism as one of its essential dimensions. In the Seventh-day Adventist Church at local church level, mission and evangelism have been used interchangeably, and often members speak only of evangelism and less of missions. To me, a simplified conclusion I got on this from all the reading I've done is that evangelism deals in reaching other Christians, and mission deals with other religions, like Islam, Muslim families, Hinduism, the Hindus, Buddhism. That's mission. But when we are ministering to others who already know Christ, but who are worshipping on the wrong day, or who's in a community where they know about Christians and follow even some of the Christian principles, that is evangelism. So recognizing that we have definitive programs already for evangelism and mission, like the cycle of evangelism, and also TMI, total member involvement, it is more the SDA mission practice that is under a realist evaluation in my study. Consequently, I have looked at what do we do for a mission practice. And I have come across the one that is supported by others, but written by two brothers, the McAuliffe brothers. In 2017, the General Conference has commissioned them to come up with a model for urban mission. And of all the different models I've studied and looked at, I found their one to be the most consistent and including all of the dimensions we need in running a mission program in the end time. They have it under 5 mission structures, and we will not go through each one here in detail. I would just really like to briefly explain to you. And the idea is that if a church needs this training, we can make that available to you in arranging for that training. The 5 mission structures, they start off by saying you need to choose an advancement placement team. That means the local church, just like Paul and Silas were selected, you start off by selecting 2 people who will go and scout the area, the method, and the way mission will be done in a certain area. So this team often is a couple or maybe 2 individuals in the church, and they go out and start off. Once they have done all the homework, they come back to the church and report, and then a leadership team, LP, is chosen. There you choose elders or leaders from the church, and you start off now with a new team because you want to land up starting a new church in another area. Then comes the discipleship group. You now have leaders who know how to proceed, but then you need to also train others who want to be involved in this mission program. Then you have discipleship training over a period of months, and you prepare. After that, the church sets up another emphasis of General Conference, which is urban centers of influence. This is a center that you run and conduct meetings during the week, bringing people together with their different needs that they may have. And here we use the method of Christ. You remember Christ's method? You remember Christ's method? Maybe it's a good time to review it. What is Christ's method according to Ellen White in Ministry of Healing, page 143? Christ mingled people, and then he just mingled and left. Mingled, and then sympathized, and then ministered to their needs. And because he did those 3 things, the 4th thing then happens, and that he won their confidence. And then the 5th step, he bade them to follow me. All right, to follow him. So those are the 5 steps in which we have. That is how we set up the urban center of influence. And then lastly, you start a new church working all of that together into a mission program. And we hope that some of the churches will be able to apply that. I have taken that model and brought it into this as we start to get towards the end, based on the Ephesus model at the local church. We have found that biblical commentators, and I maybe just need to share with you why I have looked at the Ephesus model. Biblical commentators have underscored the importance of Ephesus, which was a city, a very important city in Asia Minor. Anybody knows what it's called today? Ephesus, what is it called today? There's an airline that flies out of Cape Town to the city. Turkish Airlines, that's right. So Ephesus is called Turkey today. So where we see Turkey, that is where Ephesus is and was in that name. So due to its intersection of major trade routes, still today, Turkish Airlines offer you that. They say, come, fly Turkish Airlines, and then you can connect to the rest of the world. It's still a part of a major trade route. And Paul did his work and mission work from that center for 3 years. Now the authors of this model, the McAuliffe brothers, have seen and looked at how Paul used his ministry in Ephesus and built it on the model that we want to share with you here today. It is interesting that some studies have been made, and it all comes back to what the church is also focusing on, and that's the 1040 window and also urban missions. So I have developed that further into the 4 steps here that I want to propose to you. I'm saying that if you want to build a missionary program at the church, you've dealt now with tensions, you've been transformed, how do you go into a mission program for the end times? We start off with the 10 days of prayer. Is there anybody who has ever been engaging in the 10 days of prayer in January each year? Is there anybody present here who's done that? 1, 2, a few of you. It's a marvelous program drawn up for 10 days of prayer in January, usually the 2nd week, which serves as a revival period for the church through reflexivity. Then the second step is then my pillar 1 that I said, attention to transformation, which can be done over 8 weeks or 2 months, with one meeting addressing one of the 8 stations of those causal factors each week. Step 3 is where we call the attention to transformation for mission, and this can be done over a period of 2 years where we work with those steps that I shared with you just now, and maybe just go back and show you. Oh, I didn't want to go there. I just want to go back to the previous model where we have looked at these different steps. I'll just get back to that slide. Okay, so as we look at it, the application of this model, thank you, Belindy, will happen over these days. One weekend where we look at prayer plus 8 stations, or you may want to do it 2 weekends, where we look one weekend dealing with the prayer session and the revival, and then for the 2nd weekend we deal with all 8 stations. I'm just showing you now different ways in which we can apply the Ephesus model. I need to say that one church in the Helderberg Basin has already approached me, and we have set up a time that we will meet together either this year or at the beginning of next year, and they chose option 3, which is 2 weekends. One weekend where we have prayer session and revival, and we do sessions 1 to 4, and the 2nd weekend we have prayer and sessions 5 to 8. The other way we can do it is 8 sessions over 8 weeks, where we have prayer and 1 session per night. So diagrammatically, this is what it will look like. We start off with prayer. That is the very long 2-year period in which we do tension to transformation for mission. And then we have 2 days in which we do evaluation of the program. Or the second one, as I've mentioned, is where you do 1 weekend. We have prayer time together and we do tensions 1 to 4. And the 2nd weekend we do tensions 5 to 8. Or you may want to do it weekend 1, prayer and revival, and then the 2nd weekend we deal with the 8 tensions and work through it. Or lastly, you may want to go through prayer and each session 1 week at a time, and we do it over 8 weeks. I'm bringing to you just various models in which we can deal with the tensions that exist between groups in the church, that will open us up and transform us to where we will then go and do the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church in the end times. And from the study and from what I've been exposed to, I believe that this is what can help us in the times in which we are living. And as I conclude and wrap up, I believe that the biblical model of mission will assist the local church, and that we will not just only sing happily together on a Sabbath morning, but know that there is no bad blood amongst us. And that we can, after church, leave knowing we want to set the world on fire for Christ, because amongst us we have removed the tensions. Our lesson quarterly not so long ago, just I think about over a year ago, when we dealt with unity in the church, said that we often don't deal with the divisions in our church, and we only just talk as if we're all united. And yet we know we're not. And so I really pray that as you reflect on missiology and preparing for the end time, that you will consider what I shared with you this morning. Missiology for the end time is a time for moving from tension to transformation for mission, so that we can be ready for Christ's second coming and prepare a people for Christ's second coming. May the Lord help us, empower us, and enable us to deal with the things that are there that may cause tension in the local church, and that we will be able to move on and do a great work for the Lord. May the Lord bless us, and as we conclude, I thank you, Dr. Letsedi.